The Bengals are 5-2 and in first place, but how good are they really? Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapien with AllBengals.com and Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Set to be joined by Mo Egger of Cincinnati's ESPN 1530. You can catch him every weekday 3 to 6 on ESPN 1530 and the iHeartRadio app. And we covered Joe Burrow. We covered this defense, Jamar Chase, and so much more. So here's my one-on-one chat with ESPN 1530's finest. How surprised were you at 4:05 or so when the Bengals were jogging back into the locker room at M&T Bank Stadium with a 41-17 victory in Baltimore?
This is easy for me to say, but in real time, not that surprised. I mean, there's a part of me that wonders, should we have talked more about the possibility of something like this happening, right? This was a Ravens team that, as good as they were against the Chargers, had sort of been walking a tightrope for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's a Bengals team that really, since Chicago, had played better week after week after week, certainly on offense. And I think you've always had a sense that there was a breakout game coming. Now, did we know it was going to be against Baltimore? Perhaps not necessarily, but the things that Baltimore does well, you kind of felt like the Bengals had an answer. They're going to blitz Joe Burrow. He's great against the blitz. They have a shutdown corner. Jamar Chase is amazing. Lamar Jackson's tough to defend. Bengals are pretty good defensively. So I'd be lying to you if I told you on Friday, yes, they're going to hammer the Baltimore Ravens and win by 24 points. But as it unfolded, I'm not going to say that I wasn't surprised, but I wasn't as shocked as I think I wasn't as shocked as I would have said I would have been had you told me on Friday they can win this game by 24 points, if that makes sense.
It does, because the logic behind it now does make sense. And I think so many of us needed to see it. Like, you could almost see the path, but are you really picking Jamar Chase to just beat Marlon Humphrey like a drum when he hasn't faced a corner like that? Are you really picking Joe Burrow to, you can't zero me against the Ravens? It's one thing to do it against the Jaguars, right? But to do it against the Ravens, it's just different. And so now you see it, and the national media is freaking out and losing their mind about, the potential of the Bengals. And I think a lot of fans are eating it up on Sunday night, Monday morning, and into the afternoon on Monday. How good do you think this Bengals team can be? Because you just said you weren't that surprised looking back at what happened on Sunday. Well, that's a former NFL MVP and was the top team in the AFC. So how good is this team?
I think they're pretty damn good. Where's the weakness? I mean, where is not that there's not areas that they can't get better. I'm sure you'll talk about what they might be able to do at the deadline in a week, and they should be proactive in trying to make their team better. But where is the glaring, just enormous, wide open hole? They don't have one. Their offensive line is okay. Their defense has been better than anybody ever would have expected. And even when they play better offenses, I'm not sure that you could say there's a total weakness that another team can expose. And health has a lot to do with that. This team is pretty healthy, but I mean, you still get the sense they haven't really tapped into some things they can do offensively that, like we haven't had the Tyler Boyd game yet, aside from, I guess, Pittsburgh. We haven't had the T. Higgins game yet. We haven't had the game where their backfield just carves up opponents. There's not a glaring weakness, and the quarterback is getting better. I mean, Joe Burrow has played a season's worth of NFL games. He's becoming more comfortable. You get the sense that he's going to be given a longer and longer leash by the coaching staff to kind of run the offense the way he sees fit. Injuries could compromise this. Quality of opponent moving forward could compromise this, but I don't really see where they're bad. And if you're not bad anywhere and you're really good at quarterback, the sky's the limit, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to look at it, because if they're flawed at guard, right? Let's say Jackson Carman doesn't catch on, or Trey Hopkins just isn't what he was pre-injury at all at any point this season. Well, if you're elite at quarterback and Burrow continues to get better and better in the pocket, well, then that's going to make everyone better in front of him on the offensive line. And I think it's realistic to expect that part of it. Let's stick with Burrow because you watched Boomer. Is Boomer your favorite Bengal of all time?
My favorite, yes, my favorite.
I thought so. Yeah, because we go back and I remember. So right now, Joe Burrow through 7 weeks, and I think I'm stealing this stat from ESPN, so I'll attribute it there. Has 17 touchdown passes that ties Boomer's record through the first 7 weeks. Bengals record of 17 touchdown passes in 7 games. How excited are you as a Bengals fan for Burrow? And it might be a dumb question, but you've seen Boomer. I haven't. A lot of our viewers haven't seen Boomer. They remember Carson. Most of them probably didn't fully buy into Andy like they are with Burrow. Where is he on that list? And do you compare him to Burrow? I know you don't go back to Ken Anderson, but where are you on that?
Yeah, the comparisons are apt. I mean, here's the thing I'll say about Boomer. Boomer Esiason, I was 11 years old in 1988. I idolized him. There's a handful of athletes that now, as a guy in my 40s, that I still just, when they show him on the video board at Paul Brown Stadium to tell the crowd how to behave, that still just gets me somewhere. But in 1988, Boomer Esiason was the NFL's MVP, and understandably so. Now, that team had a great running game. They also had a really innovative offense that, frankly, reverberates to this day. They were one of the first teams to go no huddle. Boomer is the best play action passer I've ever seen, play action fake passer that I've ever seen. But even during that season, would you have taken Boomer Esiason ahead of Jim Kelly, Dan Marino, Joe Montana, Warren Moon? I mean, that was a really kind of a golden age of quarterbacks. There were a ton of, I'm sort of rolling through my head here. I just mentioned some Hall of Famers. I'm sure there were more. Steve Young was in the league backing up Joe Montana. And then you had dudes like Randall Cunningham and Phil Simms. I don't know that at any point you would have said, well, I want to build my franchise around Boomer Esiason instead of, anybody else in the league. You might not be willing to say that same thing about Joe Burrow right now, but it's conceivable that you will soon, right? It's conceivable. And I think with Boomer, there was the perfect marriage of player and system and coach that really blended together into this cocktail of amazing offensive success in 1988. And look, they were really good in 86 offensively. I think they had the number 1 ranked offense in the NFL. They won 10 games. They did not make the postseason. They were really good offensively in 89. They were really good offensively in 1990. And Boomer was a big, big part of that. But you never had a sense that Boomer was still the best quarterback in the league, or that he was the guy that just led the conversation about quarterbacks you would want to build your franchise around. I think Joe Burrow is going to get there. Now, right now you might say, Mo, come on, Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen. And there's, we're in a really good age right now of fun quarterbacks, Kyler Murray. But you're not going to be able to have that conversation without talking about Joe Burrow being a guy that you would take first to build your franchise around. I don't think you would have said that about Boomer. It's also worth mentioning, Boomer didn't play well in the postseason. They kind of won in spite of him in 88. He didn't play great in the Super Bowl either. Obviously, you can't side by side compare what Boomer did in the postseason to Joe Burrow, but I think that's worth paying attention to as we always, talk about who the best quarterbacks in the franchise's history are, where Joe Burrow might be. I'm getting a little away from your question, but I think Joe's going to end up being the best quarterback this franchise has ever employed. And I'm of the belief that Kenny Anderson should be in the Hall of Fame. I revere Boomer. I respect what Carson and Andy did. It just feels like the ceiling for Joe is higher. It just feels like the ceiling for what Joe could accomplish, both in terms of winning games and doing crazy statistical things. And the era he's in has something to do with this. It feels like his potential is greater than Boomer's ever was. And I was there for 88. I was there for him in his prime. He was phenomenal. I think Burrow's going to be better. And again, I think you are going to be able to have conversations throughout his career where you say, okay, who's the best quarterback in the NFL? And the consensus call might not be Joe Burrow, but he's going to be in the conversation. I'm not even sure that in his best season, Boomer was really in that conversation.
Yeah, because with Burrow, there's never going to be a conversation where he's got the best arm in the league. Mm-hmm. But he's extremely accurate. What he's going to be elite at is the pre-snap diagnosing, which is Peyton Manning. Brian Callahan was with Peyton Manning in Denver, which is Tom Brady. When you look at the path for him to be elite at that, and mentioned in those top, among those top quarterbacks in the league moving forward. And then something that stood out to me, he mentioned it to Albert Breer it was after the game on Sunday. It ran on Monday morning. He said, "This is who we are."
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have success like that, and you've tied the franchise record through 7 weeks for touchdowns, and you've thrown for 416 yards, and you just beat the crap out of the Ravens and an MVP in Lamar Jackson, and you're not really surprised by that in year 2 when you're coming off of knee reconstruction surgery and your offensive line is still either average or below average, and there's just still there's question marks about coaching, and he's just like, yeah, no, this is what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you have someone that's at that standard and that, like, I think he's a football freak, like obsessive about it. The odds are good that he's going to become great at it. And so that's the other part of it that stands out. He expects the Bengals to win the division, even though they're still not favored to win the division, right? It's just what he expects. And that's, I think that goes a long way.
He's just transformed everybody's attitude, and you're closer to the team itself than I am, obviously. But I feel like he's transformed the attitude of the city. He's transformed the attitude of the fan base, and I think, I talked about this on my radio show a little bit. What the win against Baltimore was it was the moment of arrival. We're now, we can start to talk about what this franchise might accomplish. But the fun thing about this is, this feels sustainable because of the quarterback, right? Like the last time the Bengals were good, and James, you and I were working together at the time with Andy Dalton. There was this sometimes said, sometimes unsaid understanding that as good as they may be, they're limited because of the quarterback play, that they need conditions around him to be absolutely ideal and perfect, which for a while in 2015 they were. With Joe Burrow, you don't get that sense, and that's why you took him number 1 overall. He was going to be able to elevate inferior talent. He was going to be able to keep your team in the hunt if there were, injuries all over. He was going to be able to win football games if he didn't have a great defense. He was going to be able to be productive if he didn't have, in a given time, great pass receiving targets. He was going to be able to function and figure out a way to make the offense work if the offensive line at a given time wasn't great. There's just not that many quarterbacks that you could say that about it. And by the way, one thing really quick, you mentioned Boomer. What's always been interesting about Boomer to me was when he won the MVP, he completed only 223 passes. He completed fewer passes in 88 than he did any of his previous 3 seasons, and fewer passes than he did in any of his following 3 seasons. They didn't ask him to throw a ton because they had a killer running game. What they would do is run the football, go play action. He'd throw it deep. He obliterated everybody in all the deep ball categories in the NFL. The game has just changed so much. Joe Burrow has close to 150 completions. He's going to smash 223, really by the time we get to, I guess, like week 9 or 10. But yeah, with Burrow, there's just been this total transformation of, I think, how people view the franchise, where now it's, okay, we might not be sure about the front office, although they've done a remarkable job with this defense, might not be sure about the coaching, might not be sure about a given position. But as long as number 9's out there, you've got a shot. You've got a shot against every opponent, and you're going to have a shot going into the season every single year as long as he's healthy.
Mo Egger is with us. Catch him every single afternoon, 3 to 6 rather, on ESPN 1530 and the iHeartRadio app. And a couple more questions for you. And you mentioned the defense, and I want to get to the coaches. But how surprised, or how much, not even surprised, how much has this defense exceeded your expectations, or have they exceeded your expectations? Because the people at Paul Brown Stadium thought they were going to be really, really good. I had my reservations. I was thinking, yeah, if they could be the 18th best unit or the 16th best unit in the league, you take it. And yet I think now expectations are, yeah, this is a top 10 unit that has the chance to get better when you look at the young players that continue to develop.
I'm shocked, quite frankly. I'm like you. I thought, okay, they at best can be somewhere in the middle of the pack. And by the way, if they are, this team's going to be fine. They'll outscore people. I didn't see the defense being the strength that it's turned into for this team. And you're right. I mean, they're still ascending. Logan Wilson, I think, still has a star turn in front of him. They've invested heavily on that side of the football, and those investments have paid off. And I mean, can you imagine what we would be talking about of Joseph Osai, who was unbelievable in his only preseason game, if he was a part of the mix? No, they've developed a defense that I think doesn't have any any weaknesses, any glaring weaknesses. And they've done that with moves that at the time were somewhat controversial, right? Like Trey Hendrickson, essentially swapping out Carl Lawson for Trey Hendrickson was somewhat controversial. It's worked out. Saying goodbye to William Jackson III and replacing him with a bunch of guys and Mike Hilton and players like that is paid off. Getting Von Bell in that free agent stretch where he was maybe the guy we talked about the least, that has paid off. The approach at linebacker, which I've ranted about for years, and ending up, sort of settling on drafting those guys in 2020. That has paid off. Signing DJ Reader and Larry Ogunjobi, that is paid off. Investing in Sam Hubbard, certainly on Sunday, it's paid off. And it's been the part of this season. We didn't talk much about it during the offseason because it was all about Burrow's rehab, the offensive line, Jamar Chase, what they're going to do offensively. Can they protect him? Jackson Carman, all of this. And then occasionally it was like, oh, yeah, the defense. And as it's turned out, I think that really has been, aside from, I guess, Jamar Chase being insane, over the first 7 games, I think that's been the story of the season, is how good they've been and the ability to talk about how good they may be, because I still feel like there's room for them to improve and room for them to grow. But, yeah, I think they have exceeded even the most optimistic projections that people had for this defense.
And so then tying it into the coaching staff, and as someone that's been really critical of Zac Taylor, critical of Lou Anarumo, but then you look at it and what they've done, who they've shipped out, what those guys are doing, and I'm not going to get into that, versus who's here in Cincinnati, who they brought in, and how it's working out. And I'm sure at some point they had, or maybe it's the flight home from Baltimore. They're like, we told you so. And it might just be for 1 minute or 2 minutes or, cocktail on the flight or whatever it is. But they deserve it, because I was wrong about some of the moves they made about, Zac potentially being a winning coach. And so now, he went into Baltimore and outcoached John Harbaugh.
Easily.
Harbaugh's punting from the 40 multiple times. Zac did it once, but you have Justin Tucker. I get it. It's Evan McPherson. You don't want to. He's a rookie. So
right.
Anyways, where are you on this coaching staff as a whole? Because I've been really impressed with how they've bounced back. When you're 6-25-1, it's easy to almost drown in the negativity that happens, especially after you blow a week 2 game against the Bears and people are questioning you. And, the first sign of trouble, you can wilt. And they haven't done that, and they're in first place.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of us who thought after that Bears game that, okay, well, things are going to start to spiral out of control a little bit. To me, the first sign was what happened during the spring, which everybody showed up to OTAs. Everybody came to OTAs, and that to me was so telling. In terms of, it says a lot about the individual guys, and it says a lot about the collection of players they have, but I think it said something about the coach. Like I don't think you get full attendance for OTAs and minicamp if you've tuned out the coach, if you don't believe in the coach, if you want a new coach. That to me was a very, very good sign. And look, a year ago at this time, the Carlos Dunlap situation unfolded the way it did. People were talking about, well, is Zac losing the team? Is he losing the locker room? I thought it said a lot the way they played at the end of the year last year. Zac Taylor won a football game against what people thought was a good Pittsburgh team with Ryan Finley completing 7 passes. And then the following week, because I thought, okay, they got their win. They beat Pittsburgh, short week. Now they're going to go to Houston and get slaughtered. And offensively, at least with Brandon Allen, they were very, very good. And that gave me some measure of confidence that, okay, this could work with this coaching staff, because they didn't mail it in. They found ways to be competitive. They found ways to win, but obviously the standard is going to have to change. I think there's been some things you can point to. Joe Burrow was ready to go week 1 last year. He was not a finished product, but you can't discount the role of coaching and getting a QB ready for week 1 in a year where there's no preseason, where he's learning the offense from his parents' couch in Athens. And he's, almost brought, if not for a shaky offensive pass interference call on AJ Green or Randy Bullock, blowing out both of his calves, they might have won that football game. And the story is Joe Burrow brought him back to win. The coaching had a role in that. So there's been a lot of that stuff to like. It does feel like Zac, as much as he drove us all nuts talking about culture incessantly, it does sort of feel like that mix is where it needs to be. And people have gripes with play calling, and I certainly have had mine. But let's see how the rest of the season unfolds before we hand down a verdict as far as that's concerned. And the reality is, he has won 7 of his last 10 football games. He has gone to Pittsburgh and won. He's won in primetime this year. He just went to Baltimore and throttled John Harbaugh. His team stood toe-to-toe with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know what there really is to not like. And I was a huge Zac Taylor skeptic. I compared him to a Dave Shula in 2 different columns I wrote, and I think that skepticism was earned, but so has been the praise. And if we were handing out the award right now, I don't know that Zac would win it, but you wouldn't be able to talk about who the coach of the year in the NFL should be without mentioning his name. And that says a lot.
It does. It does. It's also nice that I don't have to say, right, first coach to be fired odds, with Zac at the top of them, like I did multiple times last year. Last thing for me, and just because I want to end on a really, really, really good note, has there ever been a time in your career, where you've planted your flag on a draft pick and then that draft pick setting records 7 games in? Because I don't know about you, but I feel pretty damn vindicated. I was writing Jamar Chase had a Penei Sewell column. It seemed like every single day, talking about it on every podcast, every radio show I was going on. And I know you had to do the same thing at ESPN 1530. And the dude goes out there and is on pace for 1,800 plus receiving yards, 15 touchdowns and 85 catches. The dude's amazing. And even me, as high as I was on him, he's outperformed anything I could have imagined through 7 games.
Yeah. Now, look, I've had a lot of bad draft takes. I said they should draft Dwayne Haskins. Thank God that didn't happen. So, I mean, if you're gonna point out the ones you got right, you got to point out the ones you got wrong. So
yes, Mo, I know I said they should take John Ross.
Hey, look,
everybody knows that.
I was all in on John Ross too, just not quite to the same extent. I was all in. I was there. I mean, I've let you take all the public bullets for that, but I was right behind you. I was right there too.
And I'm fine with it, because I think when you look at it the way I did, did Ross have the mentality or the health? No, but when you have a weapon like that, we're seeing it now about how great a weapon and how much a weapon could transform your offense.
Yeah, I say this all the time. If I understand the thought process and I understand what you're trying to do, I'm not going to go back and hammer you if the results don't pan out the way we want, right? Sure. I mean, it's like a trade, and there's obviously, like in baseball, there's more trades, right? If a trade doesn't work out, but I understand the thinking behind it and what you were trying to do, and it made sense at the time. If the results don't work out, I think it's unfair to go back in time and crush somebody for doing something that we all understood at the time. So in terms of just talking about the draft year in and year out, we've never had a debate like the one we had this year, right? We've never had player A versus player B. We've had, hey, they can go in this direction and take this guy, or they can go in this direction and take this guy, or go in this direction and take this guy, or it was Joe Burrow. It was going to always be Joe Burrow, and it was a matter of shouting down people who thought he was going to pull an Eli or something like that. This was very clear. It was 2 guys who played different positions, and it was sort of a philosophical thing. And I've said a number of times, if you wanted the Bengals to take Penei Sewell, great. I understood that. I did. Hey, the offensive line stinks. Let's go get the best offensive lineman in the draft. I think it was comical that people were comparing him to Anthony Munoz. Anybody who did that has no idea who Anthony Munoz is. It's really unfair to do to the guy. But, okay, you want them to take Penei Sewell, and if they do, great, awesome. They got the best lineman in the draft. I was team Chase, if you will, because I understood they lacked explosiveness. I also know what a guy like that can do for your offense, the number of things it can make you do, the way that having guys who get open right at the line of scrimmage can help protect a quarterback. I also understood that there was pretty decent depth on the offensive line. Where it drove me nuts is it wasn't enough to say they should take Penei Sewell. it then turned into, well, if they take Jamar Chase, it just goes to show they're irresponsible. No, it doesn't. It goes to show they have this line of thinking that pulls them in the direction of taking a wide receiver that they think can help remake their offense. Or, well, if they take Penei Sewell, Joe Burrow is going to leave because he's going to be on. Like, stop. Hey, I want them to take the lineman. That's fine. So I have no reason to root against Penei Sewell. I hope he has a fine career. He seems like a really good kid. I hope he has a lot of success in Detroit. Jamar Chase could have been a total bust. And I would have said, look, I understand what they were thinking. They think this guy is a talent worthy of the number 5 overall pick. He's going to give them a dimension that they've lacked. There is a Burrow Chase connection, and a guy with that sort of physical skill can change your offense. And if he changes the offense to the extent you think, he can change your entire franchise. That obviously has happened. So I am enjoying taking a victory lap, not because Penei Sewell taking him would have been wrong, not because I didn't understand the reasoning why somebody would want to take an offensive lineman, but because of the just massive amount of stupid things that people said about what it would mean for the Bengals if they took Jamar Chase, how irresponsible it would be. You know, Mike Tannenbaum, the former Jets GM, talking about, well, they should be kicked out of the NFL if they take Penei Sewell, or Joe Burrow is going to be hauled out on a cart if they don't take Penei Sewell, or this is why the Bengals never win. And all those things were silly to me. So I am enjoying sort of throwing that back in people's faces. But in terms of getting the pick right, they could have drafted Penei Sewell, and maybe he's the best lineman in the league right now, and this team is still 5-2. I'm thrilled with the guy the Bengals have, but even had he not played as well as he's played, and he's obviously on a historic pace, I always would have been okay with it because I understood the thought process at the time.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. By the way, just to let you know, and I've kept you longer than I planned on. Mike Tannenbaum, I crushed him right here on this channel. And he called you Mo Eggers, by the way, which I thought was BS. Like, it's really not that hard, and I'm sure you get it. But, like, my last name is hard, right? Rapien is hard. You know what isn't hard? Egger. It's pretty damn easy. Everyone eats eggs, and everyone says after plenty of words. So, I crushed him for that, and maybe that's why he's on ESPN and not a GM in the league right now. But
again, the whole lot. Well, they should. And again, you and I both know you have to say things to get noticed. I understand that, but this idea, it's like he said. Well, the Super League disbanded. The Bengals should be disbanded from the NFL. If they, first of all, okay, we're not really taking you seriously, but the extremes to which people went. I mean, we even dealt with it during the Burrow thing, right? Like quarterbacks. That's where quarterbacks go to die. Not really. I mean, no, they basically had 2 guys for close to 2 decades. He's going to pull an Eli. How do you know that? Well, some guy in a podcast said it. Oh, okay. Well, the dumb things that came out of people's mouths leading up to the draft, the last 2 years was insane to me, including people whose opinions I would ordinarily respect, like Mike Tannenbaum.
Yeah, that's fair. Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. If you did, you should catch Mo every single weekday, 3 to 6 on ESPN 1530. And if you're not in Cincinnati and you can't tune in, it's fine. You just download the iHeartRadio app, type in ESPN 1530, and you can get more awesome takes from Mo every single weekday, 3 to 6 Eastern. Mo, this was a lot of fun. I kept you longer than I wanted, but I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me anytime.